Hello.
Our story begins on Malachor at the peak of a Sith temple. Ahsoka could see Ezra and Kanan holding on to each other. They were holding a Sith holocron that Vader wanted. If he could get a grip on it, he might be able to unlock its secrets. Ahsoka came from below the temple where she was knocked down, and leapt up to the top level and ran forward. Her feet caught the attention of Vader as he twisted around and looked at Ahsoka. Before he could even react, her lightsaber ignited, and she used him as leverage to propel herself over him as he tumbled backwards to the ground. Ezra and Kanan were released, and the gates closed in front of them. They could not get back in, and they had to leave. Without Ahsoka pushing them away, they, especially Ezra, wanted to get back in and save her, but Kanan told his apprentice they needed to leave immediately, and so they did. On the interior, Ahsoka looked over with a chill running down her spine. Anakin. She heard Anakin's voice. When he looked over, her name was said again, and she looked into the eye of Anakin Skywalker. She could not believe it. Ahsoka was so shocked. How could he have fallen so far? She told him that she wouldn't leave him, not this time. Vader stood to his feet, towering over her, and instead of telling her to die, he reached out his hand and asked that she join him. The temptation to say no was overriding the want to say yes. She couldn't leave him again, but at the same time she couldn't just accept a path of darkness forever. It wasn't within her. It wasn't who she was. Vader, on the other hand, looked down. He could see the questioning in her mind. He could see how she was so fearful of the choice she would make. If she chose to say yes, she'd be stuck in the gridlock of the dark side. If not, she'd have to defend herself from Vader again. He placed one foot in front of himself and asked her again that she join him. The hesitation in her eyes showed where her loyalties lay, but he placed the blade on his belt and told her it could be just as it was. Her memories flashed before her eyes, all the times they had together as master and apprentice. So many good times. She was shaken to her core. Where to go? What to decide? Vader told her that the structure was going to collapse if they did not leave now. And all the while Vader was using techniques of manipulation that he learned from his dear old master on her. Vader stepped forward, and with the force he lifted the gate of the structure. His eyes moved to her, and she looked at the one visible eye. Ahsoka put her weapons on her belt and sauntered over, out from under the gate. Vader followed her and released the gate after he crossed under it. The two of them looked at each other for a moment. There was silence in the air, and Vader told her that she could join him now. They had a chance to make things the way they wanted them to be. He told her that after all their time apart, they could be master and apprentice again. He could show her how to harness the dark side and utilize it. Ahsoka, after all she went through to purify her blades, didn't want to just throw that away, but the offer was genuinely tempting. How could it not be? It was her master. It was the man who taught her throughout the Clone Wars, and the same person who saved her from the execution after the temple bombing. That truth could not be denied, and so what could she do about it? Vader told her that she could be provided amnesty when she revealed where the rebel base was. Ahsoka stopped. She said that she would not sell out her friends. Vader stopped, and then his thoughts drifted. He could do this a different way, no biggie. He could still manipulate the situation to work in favor for him. He told Ahsoka that she wouldn't have to do that then. He would like her to accompany him to another location. Ahsoka asked where that would be, and Vader told her that he was taking her to the planet of Crayus II. She asked where that was, and he told her that it was in the Outer Rim. He didn't plan on informing her where Crayus II actually was. He continued and informed her that they would go to his Star Destroyer so they could get a new mask, and then they would go. Ahsoka nodded her head, and she was cautiously optimistic about where her former teacher was trying to take her. After Vader got his helmet repaired, Ahsoka asked him some questions. She was curious as to why he was always wearing the helmet, and he simply told her that he couldn't breathe. There was so much she didn't know about Anakin, or, as they now referred to him, as Vader. He didn't like talking about the past, and when she asked questions regarding it, it was like they were master and apprentice all over again. His answers always varied around "I don't want to talk about it," or "You don't need to know about it." It drove Ahsoka mad, but she left it alone. Part of her felt like she could genuinely turn Anakin back into Anakin, though she was unsure. That was her plan. She wouldn't sell out her friends, and she wouldn't be corrupted. Little did Ahsoka realize what Vader had in store for her. He planned on turning her to the very least an Inquisitor. She was a useful ally, and he wanted to be sure that he didn't lose out on having her as an ally. This wasn't some semblance of Anakin Skywalker holding on. This was Darth Vader, a Dark Lord of the Sith, preparing the Force's student to join him in the dark side. He started with very basic things, simply getting Ahsoka to follow his path. That was the first thing. One thing that set Sidious apart from Vader was the ability to manipulate. Sidious had a large box of manipulative tactics that he could use. Vader, on the other hand, would simply copy and paste what Palpatine used on him when he was still Anakin Skywalker. He told Ahsoka that the dark side could help her save those she cared about. She asked if it would help save him, so instinctively he lied to make sure she knew that she could save him by joining him. When they arrived on Crayus II, Ahsoka was greeted by a disgusting-looking structure built into the side of a scary-looking mountain. It was another Sith temple. Why was she being taken here? What purpose did Vader have to bring her here? Simply, if she joined, she would be safe. If not, she'd be killed. It's not like she could simply escape. Vader and Ahsoka walked side by side to the Sith temple. He told her to stretch out her arm and use the Force. She shook her head. He turned ever so slightly and told her that only a master and apprentice could open the gate. He needed her help to get it open. Ahsoka looked at him for a moment, and without looking back to the gate, her arm slowly raised. Vader raised his hand as well and told her to concentrate all that pained her. To think about what the Jedi did to her, to think about what the war pained for her, and the loss of all of her friends. Ahsoka gritted her teeth, trying to avoid something she spent so many years actively avoiding. It slipped out. The dark side radiated from her hands, and she opened the gate. Vader told her she did well. She asked how that was, and he told her that he didn't even use the Force to open the gate. It was all her. The two of them walked into the temple and looked at the grandeur towers that resided within it. Dust filled the air, and the two of them continued forward. Vader walked in front of Ahsoka, and he told her that he wanted her to do something for him, something that was irresistible to any mortal who held it. Vader found it here on Crayus II several years ago, and it was removed from its location on Volok. A group of Sith loyalists from Exegol removed it and put it into an altar. Vader, because of his gloves and metallic limbs, could resist the pull from the mask as he twisted it over and placed it in Ahsoka's hands. She looked at the mask for a solitary moment, and then she took it out of his hands and asked what it was or why he had it. Vader told her that it was a guide, it was an artifact, and it was the way she would serve the dark side. Ahsoka hesitated and looked up at Vader before her arms lost control and the mask was slowly lifted up to her eyes and placed over her face. She squirmed as much as she could until her body dropped to the ground, as if she was lifeless. Vader stood over her and reached his arms out to both sides. Within his mask, he closed his eyes and the Force flowed through his limbs. He grabbed a hold of the statues and used the Force to ignite the temple into a flame of darkness. The rise of the sinister dark side of the Force lifted Ahsoka's body from the ground, and the mask of Nihilus whispered an evil chant in the language of the Sith to her. Vader pushed the temple further and further until everything became silent. Ahsoka heaved a deep breath and she looked over. She looked at Vader, and then the mask. It wasn't a possession, was it? Ahsoka looked at the mask and told Vader that she didn't know she could handle any part of this. Her mind became a chasm shrinking from her eyes. She saw through. Everything felt so distant from her and she felt so alone. She stumbled back and forth until she fell. Vader caught her. He placed her inside the tomb of Darth Nihilus. It wasn't his actual tomb, because Nihilus at the time of his death wasn't a mortal being. He was just a wound in the Force. But the Sith Eternal constructed a tomb in his honor. The temple on Crayus II radiated with the dark side, and it was its beacon. No matter what Sith were added to the temple before or after Nihilus's death, he was the center of gravity in the temple. All the dark side radiated from where his tomb was. Vader wasn't possessing her, he was manipulating her. He would teach her the true nature of the dark side. The whole point of bringing her here was to ensure her fall into the darkness, so that she would become reliant on its devious call to her. Vader waited for hours, and when she awoke, her body was covered in goosebumps. She shivered and she climbed out of the small tomb to find Vader standing, looking at the statues. She asked what had happened. He told her that she nearly died, which wasn't at all true. But the dark side kept her alive. Vader expressed that had she not used the dark side before entering, she could have very easily lost her life. Ahsoka stumbled out of the tomb and looked around. She asked why she was placed in the tomb, and Vader told her that it was a beacon to the darkness on the planet. It would protect her, and protect her it did. Ahsoka stood up a little shakily again, and she asked what they were going to do now. Vader told her to ignite her lightsaber, and she did. The pure whiteness had vanished, and it was consumed by a darkish color. The white had an alluring sunset glow to it, one that made everything feel even more surrealistic. Vader told her to come along with him, as he brought her out of the temple. Though it wasn't through the side they entered, he told her that the dark side called to her, and she asked how he knew. Vader looked up as the doors above them opened, revealing a pale moonlight. He told her to let it consume her, let it overwhelm her. She confessed her fear in doing so, and Vader told her that it would give her the ability to use the Force unlike ever before. Let her anger take control, seize control over what she does not, and let it fill her. Ahsoka listened with her mind, but she denied in her heart. Her body slowly reacted to what she heard and her arms lifted up. The power of the Force flowed through her body, and she looked up, and pillars cemented into the ground, unmoved for centuries, began to buckle and sway. Ahsoka smiled and she felt further into the darkness, allowing it to consume her, allowing it to undermine everything she had ever worked against. It was so powerful, so consuming, and it gave her more than anything she'd ever had before. She dug deeper, and pieces of the wall began to crack. Vader looked over in pride. She had so much further to go, but she would prove to be a fine ally in the dark side. Vader told Ahsoka to continue, to focus, to allow it to course through her body, and she listened. These exercises would continue for days. Vader maintained control over his Star Destroyer, and his master knew where he was. Truthfully, Vader hadn't planned on using Ahsoka for anything too thought-provoking yet. It was all a slow-burning plan. He had time, and that's all that mattered to him. Ahsoka slowly delved deeper and deeper into the dark side, and it filled her with more than she could have ever imagined. Ahsoka didn't know how this was happening, but she didn't reject it. The power she felt consumed her, and she wanted more of it. By the time they were finished on Crayus II, she was a believer in the dark side of the Force. She saw that it could be a gift, and that all she had been doing was restricting herself from the true power of the Force. Her white lightsabers now carried a crimson color. She spent an assortment of time bleeding them and falling into the darkness. When Vader felt she was ready, he took her to his master on Coruscant. For Ahsoka, it was a weird trip. She walked through the halls of an Imperial Star Destroyer. Instead of the clones, they were stormtroopers. Instead of Yularen, it was an assortment of nameless officers, sliding to be favored by a man who didn't care for them. Vader wouldn't say much inside the ship, but Ahsoka at this point was more so accustomed to this new Anakin. He was quieter, less fun, brooding, and poised unlike ever before. When they arrived on Coruscant, Ahsoka was surprised when they returned to the Jedi Temple. It felt so different, and instead of beckoning a light from her, it only pushed her further into the darkness. She didn't understand why that was, but she saw a number of artifacts that weren't here when she was last inside the temple. Could it be that they belonged to the Sith? As they entered Palpatine's throne, she was surprised to see what happened to him. Vader immediately knelt and Ahsoka didn't move. Sidious tilted his head in a confused manner and asked Lord Vader if this was, after all these years, Lady Tano. Vader said quietly that it was. Sidious expressed interest in how she ended up here on Coruscant, and if her intentions were indeed true when it came to serving the dark side. The fear that Ahsoka felt for joining Vader was pushing her further into the darkness. She wasn't fully on board with being a disciple of Sidious, but she could see herself going that route at this point. The darkness that resided in her only pushed her towards it more and more. She could not escape the call to be a member of the dark side. It was everything. Sidious walked up to her and asked her how she liked the temple on Crayus II. She said it wasn't quite the magnificence of the Malachor temple. Sidious nodded his head, suggesting that there were greater temples in the galaxy. Of course, for Sidious, he preferred Exegol to any of the other temples. The Jedi didn't know about it, and neither did a lot of the Sith. It was a secret homeworld for the best of the Sith. Sidious expressed to Lady Tano that she would be provided protection from the Empire and Lord Vader if she gave over information regarding the rebels. Her initial disregard of this sentiment had vanished. Now she was fighting herself. Could she or would she? Ahsoka told the Emperor that the rebels were scoured across the galaxy, and they would continue staying that way for good. He looked at her disappointedly, and then down at Vader. He asked Vader if he actually had any realistic intentions with Lady Tano, or if he was simply stalling so he could betray him. Sidious looked over at Ahsoka and told her that if she was meant to replace Vader, and Vader was meant to replace him, then it would not work. Ahsoka was confused. Sidious made it very clear. His head twisted and lightning rang out of his fingertips, and Vader cried out in pain as he slammed to the floor. Ahsoka's lightsabers ignited. Sidious smiled. The lightning stopped, and he congratulated her on her ability to cultivate these dark weapons. It was not easy to bleed a crystal after being in the light for so long. His joy turned into seriousness as he demanded that Ahsoka inform them of the rebels' location, or Vader would die. Ahsoka could tell that the suit was designed to hurt Anakin whenever he was in contact with electricity. Ahsoka put her hands up, and she deignited her weapons, and told Sidious what he asked to hear. She told him that the rebels were on the Talon. The other groups she didn't know about. Her position in the Alliance was high, but she as of yet wasn't aware of the Yavin 4 base. She did know that Bail Organa and Mon Mothma were involved. Sidious scoffed. Who didn't know they were rebels? He had his plans for them, but they wouldn't disband the Imperial Senate for another couple of years. Maybe 4 at the most, but likely in the next 2 years. He turned back to Ahsoka and demanded that there be more. She shook her head. She said that's all she knew from her time inside the Alliance. Sidious told Vader to go out and deal with the rebels on a Talon. If they were there, then Ahsoka would live. If they weren't, then she would die. Vader got to his feet and beckoned Ahsoka to come with, and as she tried to move, she was stuck. Like she was cemented to the ground. Sidious told Vader that if he failed, she would die. She couldn't go with him. Vader bowed and walked out of the room. Ahsoka looked back and felt control fill her body again. Sidious told her that she had choices to make, and he would be walking her through those choices. If she thought the way the Sith was for her, then she had to be prepared for the baggage that came along with being a Sith. She couldn't just be in it to win it. She would never be able to kill Vader, and she would most certainly never be able to kill him. Where did she belong inside this puzzle? Was she really willing to join the dark side? Because if not, she would just be in a world of pain for the rest of her miserable life. Ahsoka looked at Sidious and ignited her weapon, and looked into his magnificent glow. She told Sidious that she chose a path, didn't she? He laughed a little. She could imagine that as choosing a path. But she had yet to face her greatest fears. She had yet to allow her anger to take control. She had yet to allow her passion be used for strength. So why not a simple instruction on how to do so? Sidious ripped his lightsaber from his belt and cut through one of her fingers, intentionally leaving it severed so they could be placed back on. He laughed at her as she dropped to the floor kneeling before him. He denied the weapon and looked down into her eyes. He told her to use that pain to fuel her, to allow it to course through her very being and control her actions, to not be afraid of what it could offer her. So she listened and raged forward. He caught her with the Force and smiled. It wouldn't work like that, but good luck for her trying. On Atalan, the Empire arrived. Vader, unlike any other Imperial officers, was going for the kill, and immediately the Imperial fleet descended on the rebels. Captain Soto and General Dodonna were completely unprepared, and within minutes, their vessels were destroyed. The tragedy is, they didn't even have a chance to relay the information to the surface at Chopper Base, and by the time the rebels on the ground knew, it was too late. Vader had come for the Sith holocron, and when he landed, the Ghost was still on the ground. He entered the ship to find Ezra extracting information from the holocron. He was so focused he never heard Vader coming in. How interesting. Perhaps he could be a useful asset in the future. Vader lifted Ezra up and threw him against the wall, knocking him out. By the time Vader exited, the remaining rebels had been captured and forced to surrender. What would become of them? Only time would tell. Vader didn't have time to wait around. Before he left the Ghost, he grabbed the Jedi holocron and placed it in his chambers. He would unlock its secrets of both holocrons in due time. Sidious messed with Ahsoka's mind more than Vader could have ever done for the few days that he was gone. With the rebel cell captured or dead, it seemed like the rebellion, aside from Guerrera, was dealt with. When Vader returned, he handed the holocron to his master, and Sidious expressed happiness with the results. He freed Ahsoka and allowed her to join Vader. Sidious told them that he had missions for them. Sidious, over the few days, made it extremely clear to Ahsoka that she was nothing more than an assassin. In other words, Sidious was Plagueis, Vader was Sidious, and Ahsoka was Maul. In his mind, it was like poetry, and it did rhyme. However, Vader would not be getting him to fall asleep. That would not happen. When they left, Ahsoka joined Vader on his Star Destroyer, and she told him that his armor was intentionally made weak. Vader looked at her. Ahsoka was confused. Obviously, she couldn't read facial expressions under the mask, so she was trying to understand what he was thinking. Eventually, she figured it out, that he didn't understand what she was saying. Ahsoka explained that the armor was made to make him weaker when he was put against electricity. She told him they could put something on it so it wouldn't hurt him as much, if at all. Vader thought for a moment, and he told her that perhaps another tactic would help them decide if they should or not. Vader reached into his drawer and pulled out the holocron Ezra was using. He gave Sidious his personal holocron so he could keep this one and use it for himself with the Jedi holocron. Ahsoka was surprised to say the least. Vader learned a lot from Sidious, and lying had to be at the top of things of that list. Vader sat in his chambers, and Ahsoka sat down just outside of it, and the two of them opened up each holocron. Ahsoka harnessing the Jedi One and Vader using the Sith artifact. They placed the holocrons together, and a void opened up, creating a beacon of light that encompassed the entire room. They were both searching for answers, and they both got them. Vader had his questions for the universe, and he was gifted the relief they gave, but also the confusion they gave him. Ahsoka, on the other hand, understood everything she needed to know. It was all laid out right in front of her. There was no denying that it would be an arduous task, but she at the very least understood where it was going and what needed to be done to fulfill it. Both Ahsoka and Vader talked about their visions, and they came to the conclusion that they were both about the same thing. Vader no longer wanted to be subservient to Sidious, as it seemed, which meant for the two power-seeking individuals, they could get what they wanted if they mounted up against Lord Sidious. It was that simple. Destroy Sidious, and they could find their victory. Ahsoka already planned on doing this, so it wasn't much of an inconvenience for her, but essentially, she was lining the exterior of Vader's suit with electric accepting material. Vader, on the other hand, told Ahsoka everything that would happen when they did this. Of course, nothing was ever easy. With Ghost Squad and a larger part of the Alliance fleet missing, Thrawn was able to begin construction of his TIE Defender project on Lothal without any interference. The TIE Defender, as it turns out, was a lot more useful than the Death Star. Sidious did have a liking for super weapons, as seen at his facilities on Exegol, but he wanted to get rid of the Alliance and chase them down with a moon wasn't exactly the most promising idea. Instead of doing that, sending out waves of Death fighters would be a lot more feasible, and it would allow the Empire to crush the Resistance. This made a lot more sense to Palpatine, so Tarkin and Krennic's project would be put on hold. All the while, Vader and Ahsoka hunted down the remainder of Alliance forces. Nothing too revealing would be found. The Empire would track a couple of cells, but nothing large like what they found on Atalan. Ahsoka, during this time, would delve deeper and deeper into the dark side, and she became closer with Sidious and Vader. Of course, Sidious didn't see her as a replacement of Vader. She wasn't nearly as powerful enough to be, which, as tragic as it sounds for Ahsoka, didn't matter. Vader had someone in his life worth keeping around. That mattered to him. He never took a liking to anyone, and to have Ahsoka around granted him an ally. Sidious knew this, and he actively pursued creating a divide within their alliance, which did work a number of times. though nothing outwardly bad would happen, and no one would know about the rising tension between the reunited master and apprentice. A lot of it was Sidious hyping Ahsoka up and informing her that she was more powerful than Vader. It was all an attempt to get them to kill each other, which failed terribly. No matter, Sidious would get it to work eventually, and that's all that mattered to him. Eventually, the rebels would learn of the Death Star and its construction and attempt to find it. The one thing they were not aware of is that the Death Star at this point had become a decoy. Palpatine decided that they would not be finished. It was only a matter of time until the Alliance found it and attacked it. So why don't they allow them to find it and think they have the jump on the Empire, and let the battle transpire? After the battle, they could very easily track the rebels back to their base, and boom, game over. While the Empire had poured most of its funding into the TIE Defender program, which was coming along beautifully, they finished the construction of the super laser on the Death Star. There was no need to leave it defenseless. The Battle of Scarif and the corresponding events would play out regularly, with Vader killing Obi-Wan inside the Death Star before the smuggler and the kids escaped to Yavin. The Death Star, while not fully operable, was placed outside the Alderaan system as a show of force. Sidious had explicit orders to not use the weapon on the planet. Alderaan couldn't be destroyed for any reason. This led the rebels on an attack of the Death Star, one that wasn't at all functional aside from the super weapon. The Alliance moved on the super station with Luke Skywalker as a member of their ranks. The intention was to destroy it before it could ever become operational. The Alliance fighters exited out of hyperspace and began their assault. The rebels didn't have anything aside from a fighter force. Most, if not all, of their heavy vessels were lost during Scarif, or they just hadn't regrouped yet. Vader and Ahsoka followed the rebels out and began a counter-assault with the TIE Defenders, cutting through wings of starfighters and giving them no real chance at victory. Luke was one of the best pilots out of the bunch. Just because he could avoid the strikes made by those who were chasing him down didn't make him perfect though. Luke was clipped by Vader, and without any reinforcements to call upon, he had to ditch the attack as he made himself into the Death Star. As he exited, he looked for another ship to take. R2 wasn't damaged either, and so when he got out, he followed Luke into the hangar bay as they searched for their escape route. As the two of them entered a hallway, Luke could see two variants of TIE fighters enter the hangar bay. These weren't the TIE Defenders that ripped apart the Alliance fighters. These were something else. Ahsoka leapt from one of the vessels and Vader got out of his. He could see the boy running. Why was it him? What was so special about him? He saw him twice on the Death Star already. Vader looked at Ahsoka and she ran forward chasing after Luke. Her lightsabers ignited. Ahsoka sped around the corner and caught up with him. The hallway had a number of dead Imperials in it, but it didn't matter. Ahsoka used the Force to stop him in his tracks. R2 looked back at her and then to Luke. He was beyond confused, until Darth Vader rounded the corner. Luke hadn't said a word, and Ahsoka kept him alive to see what Vader wanted to do with him. Vader stopped and asked who this boy was. Luke chanted his name, saying he was Luke Skywalker, the son of Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker. He really locked onto what Ben told him, and it was mostly because Luke wanted Vader to know that he wouldn't become victorious. He wouldn't kill another Skywalker. Vader didn't say a word, and Ahsoka's look moved back and forth. Luke saw his opportunity. Vader was close enough to him that he could kill him. It would all be so perfect. Luke grabbed his father's weapon from his belt and darted forward, igniting it. Vader placed his hand in front of him, and Luke was stopped mid-movement. He looked down and told him he had much to learn, before using the Force and throwing his son to his feet. Vader locked onto the lightsaber and pulled it into his hands and accessorized it. He was very fascinated by how Luke came to acquire this. It must have been through Obi-Wan. Vader turned to Ahsoka and told her to bring Skywalker to the brig on the Star Destroyer. She nodded her head and got Luke to the brig. Vader was fascinated with this. His vision was seemingly coming true. A vision that was originally told to Ahsoka as a fabrication, then a truth. Vader eventually arrived inside of the Star Destroyer after spending a number of hours contemplating the potential of Skywalker actually being his son. What an odd occurrence. How was it even, if at all, possible? Vader couldn't ponder for too long. He was required to get into a briefing where Grand Admiral Thrawn informed the Empire that he found Guerrera's men on Jedha, and he was launching an invasion after them. This would see the end of their rebellion. With the Imperial Senate disbanded, Alderaan and Chandrilia were going into martial law that could ensure each planet's senators could be found and removed. Vader didn't pay attention to this briefing, and he never really did anyways. But this time, he was focused on the idea of turning his son to the dark side. It didn't seem all that feasible, but Luke said he was the son of Anakin Skywalker, and he wanted revenge for his death. Is it possible that Obi-Wan took what he said on that moon literally? Obviously, he convinced Luke that Anakin and Vader were two different people, and while it wasn't the truth, Vader even convinced himself of the same thing. He could turn Luke, it was possible. So, he went to the brig himself and told Luke that he was his father. If Luke joined the dark side, he could join the path of victors. He could be more powerful than he could ever imagine. While Luke wasn't all that familiar with light or dark, he hated the idea of joining a man who killed his— wait, what? Did he say his father? That's not true. That's impossible. Luke, without any formal Jedi training, was placed right in front of one of, if not the most difficult choices he'd ever had to make in his life. Luke was bound to the idea of being a hero, and Vader was not that. He could delineate between right and wrong, and without anyone who he really loved, he didn't fear the chance of losing them. He obviously thought of Han, Chewie, and Leia as cool, but Han, Leia, and Chewie were not people he actively cared about. Han and Chewie also vanished after delivering Leia to the Alliance. Vader didn't show any interest in finding the Alliance base. He only wanted to know if his son would join him, which meant that while Luke wasn't really there with the Force yet, could tell that Vader was more concerned with him than anything else. This was confusing, and none of it made any sense. Why would Obi-Wan lie to him? But also, what would he have to gain from lying to him about this? Luke would never join Vader. It seemed tempting on the surface, but he could not do that. Vader left Luke to dwell on his thoughts for a number of hours. During this time, Ben Kenobi's Force Ghost would approach him. Luke was furious, but he learned that it was indeed the truth. He was told by Ben that the Force was strong with him. Don't become a pawn of the Emperor. Why would he do that? It wasn't something he could ever settle for. Vader had other plans. He could kill Sidious and have both Ahsoka and Luke with him. It'd be perfect. It seemed like his vision was coming true. All he had to do was act on it. Vader went to Ahsoka and told her that they would become the ruling power in the galaxy. With the Imperial Senate disbanded, no one could challenge them. If they killed Sidious, they could become the rulers. See, Vader had a vision of rebuilding his legacy. Now with his son, perhaps they could resurrect Padme. Of course, Vader had no clue that Leia was alive, but when he learned, he'd obviously want to bring her in on this. Ahsoka was in for this. She knew that fighting the Emperor would be challenging, but with Vader's new suit being resistant to lightning, they'd be able to defeat him. Luke would be held in the Star Destroyer until the time was right. On the other hand, Thrawn would bring an end to Saw Gerrera's rebel cell and send out scouts to find others. His strategy was unmatched, and he prepared to defeat anyone who stood in his way. Vader and Ahsoka would arrive inside the Emperor's throne room to inform him that the Alliance was all but destroyed. He expressed his happiness with this and then turned to Vader and told him that he wasn't here to tell him the status on the Empire. Vader looked up and ignited his lightsaber. Ahsoka did the same. How nice. The master and apprentice would die right here, together. Sidious may have been old, but the dark side was still with him, drawing a lightsaber from his lair and rising from his throne. Ahsoka leapt in quickly, using the dark side to fuel her movements and her power. She had grown in the years since joining Vader, and now she could prove her worth as a dark side user. All of her talent and skill were no match for the raw talent of Sidious. He slammed his blade at her and nearly killed her several times, while deterring Vader with quick movements. Sidious was already simply playing with his food. He launched Ahsoka from her feet with the Force before singling out Vader. He knew that the final touch would be electrocuting Vader to death. That's all it took. His lightsaber slid through Vader's stomach, and without buckling, he reached out and grabbed Sidious by the throat. Sidious quickly reacted by shooting electricity into Vader's suit, but it didn't deter him. Before Sidious could actually realize what was happening, Ahsoka was able to launch herself across the room and cut him down. The two of them fell to their knees. Ahsoka was breathing heavily, and Vader looked disgruntled, but his air was coming out in a still and steady manner. They got up, and Ahsoka asked, "What now?" Vader told her they needed to take over the Empire now. They were the Dark Lords of the Sith. He then told her to go to Exegol, using his Wayfinder to make sure Palpatine did not survive that attack. This likely would be the worst mistake Ahsoka ever made. While Ahsoka was gone, Vader took in the reins of the Empire. He killed off some of the Imperial officers he thought jeopardized his leadership, most in particular Karkin and Krennic. Thrawn was given full command of the Imperial Navy. Vader had his son brought to his new lair where he would try and convince him to join the dark side. However, Luke was resilient. Without any loved ones to be threatened, he told his father that he would never leave the light. There was no temptations to join the dark side. It's not like some part wasn't tempting. But while Luke was alone, he was visited by Ben's Force Ghost, and he was given advice to avoid being completely overwhelmed by the dark side. As a Force Ghost, Ben couldn't give all the answers, but he had an assortment of answers that could actually help, in a way without telling the future. Luke would go through a similar process to Ahsoka, but he would not bend. Without a connection to his father like Ahsoka had, he couldn't be convinced. On the other hand, Luke could sense something that Ahsoka had lost sense of. Luke could feel that there was good within his father. It was the weirdest thing, too. He believed that Vader could be saved and turned back into Anakin Skywalker. Vader would try and try for days, onto weeks, but Luke would not budge. Vader couldn't torture his son, and this, more than anything, proved to Luke that there was still good in him. Ahsoka, upon returning from Exegol, reported that there was nothing on Exegol for them to worry about. Sidious was dead, and the Sith Eternal belonged to Vader. She knelt and then begged the question about young Skywalker. Vader didn't have anything to say, so Ahsoka got up and asked why he hadn't turned Luke to the dark side yet. Vader expressed his resilience to the dark side. Ahsoka grabbed her blade from her belt and looked at Luke, who stood in the corner of the room. Vader told her that he needed more time, and without hesitating, Ahsoka ignited the weapon and slid it across the room, holding it to Luke's neck. She demanded that he make his choice before kicking him to the ground. Vader put his hand out, but Ahsoka turned back and asked why he was defending him. She gave away everything to join him, and now he wanted to think about things? Give other choices a second chance? Vader stopped and looked down at Luke. who pulled his father's weapon from his belt and ignited it. Luke pushed it up and hit Ahsoka's blade. She stepped back and thought that she would get to enjoy this at the very least. Vader didn't want this. He didn't want to have to choose. He knew Ahsoka longer. That was his best friend, his sister. He needed her. But as he watched Luke get thrown back every time their blades collided, he knew what he had to do to ensure his vision came true. Ahsoka smacked Luke to the ground and she stepped back. She looked at Vader and told him to choose. Kill her or kill Luke. A son or a sister. Which one would he choose? Vader looked at her and demanded that she stop doing what she was doing. Ahsoka was so filled with the dark side, she then turned to him and told him to choose, or she would choose for him. Vader shook his head, telling her that they didn't need to make a choice. There didn't have to be a death of any of them. Ahsoka deignited her lightsabers and kicked Luke's blade away from his hand. She leaned up to him, and then held her blade to his chest and then pulled hers to her chest. She told Vader to choose. If he didn't, then she would. Vader was so hesitant. He didn't want to, but his choice was made before she forced his hand. Vader's blade ignited into her chest, and she fell backwards. She coughed up, suffocating as she looked into the mask. He felt so much shame, but even more than that, confusion. Ahsoka's last moments were painful and quiet. She simply looked at Vader and died on the ground. Luke looked up at his father and asked why he chose him. Vader was silent for a moment. He was trying to understand why he made the decision. He didn't really understand, but he did it. It was a choice he made, and maybe his son was right. Vader reached out his hand and helped Luke up. Luke was still so unaware of how to feel. Not that it helped that Vader was in reality his father. He was just trying to get a grasp on what just happened. But he told his father that there was nothing stopping him. He could rejoin the Alliance. Vader shook his head. He told his son that he couldn't just do that. Luke asked why not, and Vader explained that after all the war crimes he committed, there was no way he could just come back. But there was a way. He could turn the tables. The Alliance was pretty much in the gutter. Alderaan and Chandrilia were blockaded. Dale and Mon and Leia were trapped on Yavin without a fighter fleet and without any support, while the Ghost Crew was able to be broken out of prison by Hondo Anak and his group of allies after the loss at Alderaan. Luke asked Vader what he was going to do, and he told his son that he'd begin to make things right. Vader immediately got to work on restructuring the Empire to crumble. It would be difficult. With every TIE fighter in the fleet already replaced by the TIE Defender, he needed a reason to cripple the ship and the Imperial fleet. Luke, on the other hand, was able to escape back to Yavin, where he would learn that his sister was actually Leia. He was told this by Bail Organa. It was a bit of a shock, but through a couple of discussions, both Luke and Leia would learn of what happened to their parents, and even Luke explained what Vader was planning to do. Bail said not to hold his breath. There was no guarantee that Vader would follow through with those ideals, but to his surprise, he did. Vader started a conglomerate of problems within Imperial ranks. First, it was with other planets by cutting off trade routes. He'd placed fleets on trade routes and allowed planets to be starved out. This turned citizens against the Empire and the Emperor. Vader knew that with Thrawn leading everything in the Imperial Navy, he could not force him out, so he brought Thrawn to his throne room and killed him. It didn't stop there, because with the trade routes cut off and Imperial citizens suffering, Vader became public enemy number 1. He wasn't even comparable to Palpatine, but then Vader destroyed the public trust for any Emperor by showing them what had been planned by Palpatine: the 2 Death Stars, Starkiller Base, and the fleet at Exegol. There were so many planets that were under threat from Palpatine's plans, not to mention his contingency orders as well. All trust for the monarchs vanished. Without a central leader in the Imperial Navy to run a coup on Vader, officers turned on Coruscant, and the largest fleet in the Empire turned on everyone else. Coruscant was a stronghold, and the Second Battle of Coruscant would be larger in scale than anything seen during the Clone Wars. At the end, it wouldn't matter, because the Imperial military structure ate away at itself. Vader escaped and disappeared. He wouldn't see his son for more than a year, mostly because of the shifting lines. Mon and Bail returned to Coruscant despite the lack of role they had in the Empire. They petitioned for a reconstruction of the Republic Senate, and in a means to end the conflict, the collected people believed it would be better than serving an emperor. This new republic would essentially be an extension of the Empire. They had control over the Imperial military. Luke didn't have a chance to ever interact with anyone, as he went to Dagobah as per request of Obi-Wan. With knowledge on who his father really was, Yoda was able to complete Luke's training into a real Jedi Knight. It wasn't easy, and it took over a year to do. Vader, on the other hand, was able to use his castle to change his armor around to make him have a much more human-like look. He could be seen as a real person, and he went out to find his son. They would cross paths on Tython as Luke began journeying through former locations of the Jedi, but he wasn't alone. Yoda was convinced to leave Dagobah, and he joined Luke on his discovery of the past. Yoda was very obviously standoffish with Vader, but he wouldn't attack. As a Jedi, he didn't seek revenge. After all, it was time they forgave him. He may have ruined an entire generation with the rule of the Empire, and he may have caused an entire generation pain of rebuilding what was lost previously, but it was time to let grudges go. He made his mistakes, but he did bring balance to the Force. The Sith were destroyed. Maul was gone, Sidious was gone, and Vader was no more. Anakin spoke to his son and learned of a daughter. But she wanted nothing to do with him. Leia also, because of her father Bail Organa, was able to be a part of the new Senate that was being rebuilt. She told Luke that while she was happy he had an interest in helping their father, she wanted nothing to do with him. She never wanted to meet him, and she never wanted to hear him say her name. He killed her mother and committed thousands upon thousands of heinous acts. He was not her father, she was an Organa. And that's all that she needed to be, and that's all she said about it. Anakin felt nothing but terrible about what he did to Ahsoka, and he committed himself to a life so that he could give her peace in the afterlife. Anakin began pursuing a means to resurrect those who were gone, but as Yoda explained, Anakin may have not been a Jedi, but the light side did not resurrect. The light let go, which is what he should have done 20 years ago when Yoda told him to, before any of this happened. There was no reason to give a darkness a chance to rise again. Anakin, while disliking the idea of asking Yoda for advice, asked him what he should do to move forward in the light side. Yoda told Anakin to purify Ahsoka's lightsabers and bury them. She could have her peace first. When she had her peace, he should purify his own. The Jedi were not dead, but they would be if they allowed a new darkness to rise. The future was in their hands. Luke and Anakin would have time to bond with each other, but Anakin would never be allowed to go anywhere near the rest of the galaxy. Even with a new suit, he would be convicted immediately, as a lot of harsher Imperial officers lost their ranks and were thrown away. Anakin wanted so badly to get away from the past that sat behind him, even become friendly with his daughter, but that would never happen. Through his hard work and dedication to the light, he was actually able to get out of the darkness. It took everything within him, but he did it. Anakin would never be able to build a relationship with his daughter, and it would never be made public who her father was. It garnered her the ability to stay in a position she liked, as she served as a senator from Alderaan, while Bel and Mon served as vice-chancellors to each other. The New Republic was very unsteady, but with a dedicated crowd of politicians, there was a chance for change. As for the Jedi, they would rebuild, with Luke as the leading member of the rebuilding process. He would also continue his bond with his father, which after years of focus on the relationship, would actually flourish. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Darth Revan, Pimp Daddy Bane, The Last Jedi, Apollo, The Eternal Padawan, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Madman Studios, Anakin003, Fordo's Legacy Star Wars, Lemon Knight, Rex the Wolf, the man with 3 first names, Dark Same 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Smash the like button if you want to support me in other ways. Go check out the Patreon. Patreon link is down below. Let's talk about the story. So this was mainly like a big parallel to Anakin's dilemma in Revenge of the Sith. It really is like the whole parallel of him having to lose something to gain something, essentially. And the truth is, I don't think, as we can see through Vader's choices in canon, I don't think Vader would choose Ahsoka in this situation, as he didn't choose Ahsoka and Obi-Wan over Luke in canon with turning to the light. I think a main thing that happens for Luke when he's called to the dark side is like a fear of losing someone he cares about. But in this story, he's already lost Obi-Wan, he's already lost Owen and Beru, and he's not friendly with Leia. He saved her on the Death Star, but aside from that, he's not super close to her, so that threat can't be used against him to turn him to the dark side. He doesn't have anything to lose, so he doesn't fear losing anything. The only thing he has to lose is himself, and in that scenario, I don't think Luke would lose himself. And that's kind of like the main thing I wanted to focus on. It's like, Luke wouldn't lose himself because he doesn't have anything to lose, right? He only has himself, and to him, as a good person that he is, I don't think he would fall down that path of darkness, which is the arc that's seen throughout his entire arc. Anyways, hope you all enjoyed the story. Did, smash the like button. Love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.